all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we are super happy to have you here, and we just ask that you bring an open mind and heart to your listening experience and to be prepared to explore vantage points that I'm convinced will help shift or solidify your current understanding of the ultimate nature of reality in a way that is extremely empowering. Speaking of exploring powerful perspectives, I would like to gift my book, The Golden Key, Modern Alchemy to Unlock Infinite Abundance to you at goldenkey.gift, where you can get the audio or ebook as my gift to you by using the code POSITIVEHEAD at checkout. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have William Gladstone here with me on the show. William is an author, filmmaker, and literary agent who has worked with some of the most influential authors in the world, including Eckart Tolle, Deepak Chopra, and Neal Walsch. Super excited to have you here. Hello, William. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to the show.
That is quite the list of authors that you've worked with there. Definitely some of my faves, and really early on. I mean, I think of Conversations with God back in the mid '90s is when that was such an influential book in my own journey.
Yeah, we've been very blessed, and Neal, frankly, is one of my best friends. He's not just a client, and that book really changed lives of millions of people.
Yeah.
It was one of the first books that really woke people up to the fact that we all have a direct relationship with, whether you want to call it God or the source.
Yep.
And indirectly, that was part of the motivation, for the film we ended up doing, Tapping the Source. And Neal is featured prominently in the film. He has a wonderful moment in the film. There's over 90 individuals in the film, so no one has more than about 2 minutes. But he also was chosen to narrate some of the sequences, so he has a little bit more role than others. But he is one of my favorite clients. But yeah, as a literary agency, we've just been very, very fortunate. We actually started the agency focused on business and technology. So we represented some of the very first people in the world of technology, people like Linus Torvalds, who created Linux, Peter Norton, who created Norton Utilities, and on and on. And that led to the creation of the For Dummies book series. So that's really what we were doing in the 80s. Then in the 90s, towards the end of the 90s, when the internet kind of took over and the need for actual books was less, we started working with mind, body, spirit authors. The first one was Ervin Laszlo, Science in the Akashic Field. And in the field of book publishing, like many fields, if you're successful in a specific area, then everyone in that area starts coming to you. And then that led, we had Neal, we had Ervin, then, Eckart Tolle was a huge opening for us. Everybody, said, "Oh, you're the agent for Eckart. You must have magic," because he went from complete unknown to the best-selling author in the world.
Yeah.
And so we've been very, very fortunate. And I stick, pretty much to mind, body, spirit books. That has been, obviously we still do the technology and the business-related books, but mind, body, spirit has been my own passion and interest. I have other agents who work for me, so we do occasionally do novels and other things, but my real focus has been on, mind, body, spirit, and, other clients are, like Napoleon Hill Foundation. And, we changed our focus in the early 2000s, I guess you say, and our mission statement, is simply to help authors and publishers create and distribute books to contribute to a better world. And that's really been our focus. We've been blessed on the financial side, and, money's never been an issue here. And, when you do good things and you help the world, money flows. And that's part of what, the books that I've written, the Tapping the Source book, which is based on the Master Key system of Charles Hannell, explains in detail. And our film, Tapping the Source, really goes into what is the essence of happiness and productivity and manifestation. And we were very gifted in terms of my network, and people like Bob Proctor and many others that actually appeared in The Secret appeared in our film as well. And Bob Proctor probably said it best. He said The Secret was a fun movie, but it was like kindergarten compared to the information you get from tapping the source, which is more like the PhD of manifestation.
Wow.
And we lost Bob recently. He passed in January, but for me, he was probably the leading voice for manifestation in terms of money and finances.
Right.
But we really had a lot of fun creating the film. My wife was the producer. I was a co-producer, and she was dedicated to pursuing the source as the protagonist of the film, tapping the source. So we really focused on a universal message, even though we had over 90 people in the film. In some cases, we would have a person in Arizona start a sentence and someone in Hawaii finish the sentence, and they had never met, and they were not in the same field. But somehow, by the nature of the way the film was created and put together, and really the energy behind the film, it really is an inspiring film that in a couple of instances, we even received reports from hospices of recoveries of people from depression and other illnesses just from watching the film. But it is a much more complex film than The Secret was. And I think because of that, and also because at the time I was focused on other things, we didn't really do much marketing. The original release didn't reach the millions of people that we know this film is intended to reach. And so we're re-releasing the film now. And one of the benefits to the people that are listening to this blog is they're going to be able, for a limited time, to have free access to the film. We really want to get this film out. And we know the film is going to have a positive impact. So we're happy to, have a few thousand or even 100,000 people get an opportunity to see this film for free, because we know word of mouth will build. And over the next year or two, we do expect to reach millions of viewers.
Excellent. Yeah, I know that the listeners' ears perk up when you say, because The Secret, obviously, it was a great door opener for a lot of people, into understanding law of attraction, et cetera. And, anyone who's been listening to this show for any length of time, we're about 1,800 episodes deep. So they've had a lot of great, they've heard and seen a lot of incredible perspectives, like Master Sha, who was on about a year or so ago, who you've just released a book about. And so hearing that it goes much deeper, tapping the source, I know their ears are perking up, and we'll tell you guys at the end of the episode how you can actually access. In the show notes, you'll see as well, where you can check out the film for free for the next month. So really, really exciting stuff. If you would, William, take a moment and share with us a little bit about your backstory, because, listeners and myself would love to know, how did you get...
I laugh because my backstory, I've already written a book just about the business side of my backstory.
Of course
it's a long story, but it's a good story.
Well, whatever's the highlights, right? Whatever feels most relevant.
I'll make it concise. I'll try to keep it to 3 to 5 minutes, but it's not that short. No, I've had a fascinating, blessed life. I was born on the East Coast, and my father was a book publisher. And he was a very innovative book publisher. His company was called Arco Publishing. They did the first test preparation books, but he also did the first health books and many other innovative books. And so I grew up in the industry, and I, of course, didn't want to work for his company because that was too easy, and
right.
the politics of working for your dad's company. So my mother, on the other hand, was very oriented. One of the reasons she married my father was she loved books, but her idea of books were, fantastic novels, and she claimed she was the world's leading expert on second-rate Victorian novelists. And in fact, at her
Wow.
passing.
That's a
She
niche.
gave the collection of her books to her Barnard University where she had attended. But so I had it all came together in one conversation. I was at the breakfast table with my mom, and we were talking about who publishes great books, and she was mentioning Farrar Straus, who had just published a couple of Nobel Prize winning novelists. And my father walked into the room at the exact same moment and said, Farrar Straus, great books. We share a warehouse with Farrar Straus. All their books do is gather dust. A great book is a book that sells. So I had this sort of direction of wanting to create books that would sell and be commercial, because as a book publisher, you're not going to be in business if they don't sell. But then also wanting to sort of follow my mother's goal of books that really move the heart, that were really great art. And it is very rare that you get a book that does both. My favorite book of all time is Cien Años de Soledad, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I wrote my thesis on that book when I was an undergraduate at Yale College. And years later, I was very fortunate in that the editor who translated and published my own novel, The 12, was also Gabriel Garcia Marquez's editor at Planeta in Mexico. And so we actually ended up having a correspondence, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez sent me an autographed copy of Cien Años de Soledad, in which he changed the word 100 Years of Solitude to 100 Years of Happiness for my colleague, William Gladstone. So that's actually my prized possession. I have it, I'm looking at it right now, of all the many awards, everything I've won. That's actually my most treasured object. Just, to write a novel that is that well written and that happens to end up, selling hundreds of millions of copies, and win the Nobel Prize. That's the ultimate, I think, for any writer. But back to my own story. So I went, so I grew up, I wrote books when I was still a teenager for my dad, but they were books like, how to score high on the real estate exam, or how to score high on the medical college admission. I was a very good student, so I would take.
Yeah, you went to Harvard and Yale, right?
I went to Harvard Graduate School, got a degree in medical anthropology, which is very relevant to, one of the topics for today's blog is the book I just wrote, Miracle Soul Healer, about Master Sha. And my background in medical anthropology was one of my motivations for writing that book, because I was really dumbfounded by the success of Master Sha, particularly his ability and claims that he could teach others to heal non-locally, just as he was healing. And we'll talk more about that in detail, but it all, I did the investigation. I know, statistics, and, you can talk about placebo, but you can't explain away his results with the placebo. Anyway, back to my story. So I'm at Yale. Then my father actually has a heart attack. They asked me to, jump back into the business. I do that for a couple of years. He gets better. And then I decide, I really want to, explore other options. So I go to Harvard and I study anthropology. And I really, I went down to the Amazon and ended up doing a village study of a small town in Spain that I chose because it was one of the few towns in history that operated under an anarchist rule for a period of 2.5 years during the Spanish Civil War.
Wow.
So it was almost more of a historical, but it was also contemporary in that my thesis was on the nature of collective distrust. And anyway, it was a very interesting project, but anthropology was not commercially viable. As I was getting ready to get my PhD, I was told, well, they've got enough PhDs for the next 20 years, so you're not going to have a lot of choices. So I had taken a leave of absence to go around the world and make a film for Rod Serling called In Search of Ancient Mysteries. And so Hollywood, it was very, very successful. I the Nazca lines, and I did all the research for the film. And so I had an open ticket in Hollywood. And so I was asked to make another film for a different company, In Search of the Historical Jesus. So I had this opportunity to work in films at a very young age. And that was really earth shattering for me, because I actually visited almost all of the spiritual locations on the planet. I mean, that was my job. My job was literally to search for ancient mysteries wherever it would
Wow.
take me. That was the definition of my job, and I did it. It was a ball. I was only 22 actually at the time, and so that combined with the background in publishing, I really had a lot of options of what I could do, and I was approached by Harcourt Brace Jovanovich, and they were setting up a new division in California. I've always had this sort of streak of adventure, and being a kid from New York City and New York, Westchester County, the idea of moving to California was very intriguing to me, and it was a big job. I was only in my 20s, and they made me, senior editor for the entire West Coast division, and charge of what they call the trade book division, which are the popular books. So I got out to California, and I was enjoying that, and but I still, had this idea that I wanted to really be a filmmaker, because I'd had the experiences with Rod Serling. And so I left Harcourt. I actually was released over a misunderstanding where I was given credit for Free to Choose, which was the Milton Friedman book, which was #1 book in America at the time. It was actually William Jovanovich who had signed that book. But in any event, there was a lot of intrigue and politics, and I was much younger than the other senior vice presidents, and they sort of painted a picture that I was too big for my britches, I guess. Anyway, it ended up, but it didn't bother me, because I said, well, that's okay. I didn't really intend to stay here more than a year or two. I just wanted the experience of working for a Fortune 500 company. And that's when I created Waterside Productions. And I created Waterside as a film production company, not as a literary agency. And I actually made my first film, just to give you an idea of what the big issue of that day was. Herpes was the big sexual problem. This was This is before AIDS or anything else. So I made a short film on how to prevent it, what to do if you got it, and I took it to Psychology Today, and they loved the film, and they said, okay, we'll take 500 units. And I said, what do you mean you'll take 500 units? At cost of production, I'll lose 50 cents on every one. He says, yeah, but if it's successful, then you'll make money in the future. And I said, you don't understand. I just started my company. I can't even get a loan.
Right.
I can't do this. So I was scratching my head what to do. And several of the books, because I'd been the senior editor at Harcourt, and I had signed very unusual authors. One was David Loy, Sphinx and the Rainbow, which was a book about the holographic model of the universe and why, from a scientific perspective, it may be that you can predict the future, but then why is it sometimes incorrect as well? And anyway, it was a very sort of heady book, and nobody that was at the company really understood the book, so they canceled the contract. And they did that. I also signed Dr. Virginia Livingston Wheeler, who was the first female intern in New York City, who wrote the first book on the relationship of diet to cancer. And anyway, there's nobody there that understood that book either. So there was like 4 books like that, and these authors didn't know what to do. They hadn't had agents. So I said, oh, I know everybody in publishing. I'll set it up as a agent, and I'll do this for you. So I was doing that sort of to try to make a little money while focusing on creating films. And, as John Lennon's song goes, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
Right.
So one of my relationships was with Nancy Kay, the daughter of Andy Kay, the founder of K-Pro Computers. So I became very good friends with Andy. The computers, this was just when the computers took off like crazy. And he had a team of document writers who came to me and said, our friends at Osborne are writing manuals and making a lot of money on the side. Would you be interested, since you know all about publishing, in representing us and getting us book deals? And I went to Andy and I said, Andy, do you mind? And he said, no. If they make extra money on the side, they won't be pushing me for raises. I think it's a great idea. So we did it. And overnight, it was 2 years, but that seems like overnight compared to normal business, we became the largest provider of technical information in the world.
Wow.
And, we literally were doing hundreds of millions of dollars in book deals.
Incredible.
That's at the retail level. We weren't making that anything close to that, but we represented the boom in the whole. When you're probably, and most of your listeners too young to remember, but there was a time where every Barnes and Noble, every Borders bookstore had an entire shelf of how-to computer manuals, and over 25% of all of those books were represented by Waterside Productions. So that was really what got us going. And then, as I had mentioned, there was this, we did all the first books on the internet. If you can believe it, one of our big bestsellers was the Internet Yellow Pages. Before there was Google, there was a book that listed all the websites so you could find what you wanted. But anyway, the success of the technology itself made the book side not obsolete, but much less lucrative. We went from selling, 20 million copies of DOS and Windows for Dummies to, a few 100,000, and still successful, but, relatively not. And so that's why, we started doing other kinds of books, and brought us to where we are today. And where we are today is I'm involved with many philanthropic organizations, and, we have our own publishing company now. As New York City publishers got more and more focused on just doing celebrity books, we found that what we used to call the mid-list, that a mid-list was a book that got a $10,000 to $20,000 advance and sold 5,000 to 10,000 copies, was no longer of interest to them. So I had some clients, and I was starting to say, I really can't sell your book. They don't want them. You just didn't sell enough in your previous books. And simultaneously with that, I was receiving a call from Amazon, and that was so amazing to me, because Amazon's policies was they never wanted to talk to a human being. Everything had to be through computer. One of our authors would say, hey, they've got the wrong name on the book, or they've got the wrong price or the wrong date, and they would never respond. They would just send emails. So when I got this call, I was like, are you sure you're not punking me? I mean, are you how do I know you're really Amazon? Anyway, he was really Amazon, was a high-level executive, and they said, Bill, you're one of the top 10 agents in the country, and you're not part of our White Gloves program. I said, what's the White Gloves program? I said, a special program. We'll cover all the expenses, and we'll publish any book that you represent, and we'll pay out 70%. And, standard, royalty from the New York publishers is only 10 to 15%. So, why don't you just work directly with us? And I said, well, one of the things that the New York publishers do that you don't do is they pay 6 and sometimes even 7-figure advances, and you're not, paying advances. So, I don't think my big time authors are going to want to take the risk, even though the royalty rate is so good. But this is what I'll do. I will encourage some of my best-selling authors, and a couple did experiment, but only if you'll give these same terms to all of my authors. So they said yes, and we started, I don't know, almost 10 years ago, and we're publishing about 50, 60 books a year. Most of them are from, established authors. We do occasionally take on a first-time author, and we've become they changed the name because of this Black Lives Matter issue, so they can't use White Gloves. I have any connection to race, but
that's funny.
They now call it curated content, and we're their number one nonfiction partner for curated content. So that's been very successful, and some of our books won major awards. And so, I'm at an age when many people think about retirement, and I'm not Rupert Murdoch going crazy, but
you've tapped the source of energy. That's apparent to all of us. Very, very, what a journey. And I'd love to hear from you, about that very thing. As far as jumped out at me seeing the name of your book, Tapping the Source Using the Master Key System for Abundance and Happiness. Obviously, you've tapped into abundance, and you certainly seem full of good cheer and not slowing down. So,
and I will say, I've always had high energy, but I think a lot of it is about just being a good person, wanting to be of service to other people gives energy. The real law of attraction, and I don't want to criticize The Secret, because I think that it did contribute greatly to waking people up.
Certainly.
But the actual portrayal of the law of attraction in The Secret is not accurate. It's not about thinking about what you want and then drawing it to you. That's not the way the law works. And if you go back to Charles Hannell, who was the first writer to write about the law of attraction, it was really, and if you go back to the Master Key system, which was created in 1912, he's really talking about the law of love. If you emanate love and positive energy, you're going to draw love and positive energy back. Now, you're not going to draw it back in the very moment. You may, but it's not about, tit for tat. It's about selfless giving. And if you truly participate in selfless giving, the universe is going to recognize that selfless giving. You're going to be at a vibratory rate which attracts a similar vibration. And that's really what the law of attraction is. It's you attract what you emit. It's being at a higher frequency. And yes, I'd say based on my life, definitely a higher frequency. I've had my stumbles. I've made mistakes. I'm not a perfect human being by any stretch of the imagination. But overall, I'm very optimistic and very high energy and always have been. And I think that's really the reason. I really do want to see everyone benefit from everything I do. Unlike most agents and really most people in business, my father actually remarked to me when I first started working for his company as a teenager, he said, "You may be too honest for this business," because I was always completely honest about, well, this isn't good or this is good. And just being very straightforward, not looking at, well, that may be true, but, I was like, no, well, we have to deal with it. This is the case. And, in business, most people are less than 100% honest because they hold back, and it's like, oh, well, it's okay because, if we are too forthright about this, it's going to hurt the bottom line. And most businesses are too much about the bottom line. But I've never been that way. I really feel the universe is infinite abundance, and do the right thing, and you may lose money in one situation, but then you'll make it in something else. I've actually walked away from deals where I thought that the other party was giving too much. And, agents don't do that. But I said, no, if this is such a small margin for you that this final nickel or dime is the difference between profitability and no profitability, we shouldn't even do it. Let's just walk away. And nobody else that I know of ever does that. But it's worked out well for me because many times I've worked on things for months and nothing comes of it. And other things, I've worked on them for 20 minutes and I've made, just my commissions tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, I don't look at every transaction and every moment as requiring immediate quid pro quo.
I think that's great wisdom. And even one of the keys in my book, The Golden Key, is align your intentions. And it's understanding, I believe, and tell me if you agree, especially as we move into this, ascension process that humanity is going through. I think you would agree. You've been at this a very long time. More and more people are waking up to the ultimate nature of reality, and that, hold on, I'm one with the source consciousness that creates and animates all things, and so are you. And therefore, service makes sense, right? Gandhi said, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. I believe that holds true because there are no others.
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And that's one of the reasons we're re-releasing the film. In addition to re-releasing the film, we're doing Tapping the Source Summits. One of the first ones we did was with Deepak Chopra and Ervin Laszlo and Master Sha. And one of the reasons I'm so excited about the new edition of Miracle Soul Healer about Master Sha is, without even knowing it, the focus of Master Sha, which is serve, to be an unconditional servant, is so aligned with the message in Tapping the Source. And when we made Tapping the Source, I had no knowledge of Dr. and Master Sha. So it's this coming together of being of selfless service and how he uses that as a healing tool, and how other people have used the idea of service in their own lives to great results. And what's happening right now on the planet, and why we're re-releasing this film, is we are entering a new level of consciousness. One of the reasons we had Deepak is, just a master at explaining what is the true nature of reality. You can go back and, the Buddha and others, they talk about this level of existence is illusion. There's a deeper reality, and we're manifestations on the physical plane of this deeper reality. For Dr. Sha, this deeper reality is the Tao. For Charles Haanel and the Buddha, it was really the source. And whatever you call it, new information is coming to us that everything is interconnected. Everything, not just human consciousness, but the plants, the rocks, the air itself. Everything is actually one unified, and we can't call it a substance. It's a unified consciousness.
Yeah.
And we cannot really survive in the way that we've been approaching the world. We cannot think of ourselves as separate individual beings in which our personal well-being is the only thing that matters. We can't even really think that our personal well-being is the most important aspect. And in an ironic way, when we start to focus on the whole, we actually protect our individual integrity as personality ego beings. And so this is a new way of looking at the world. And Tapping the Source of Film is a big step forward, but at a level that is less abstract than, this higher level consciousness understanding. And one of the reasons, Bob Proctor, who was in both The Secret and Tapping the Source, said, The Secret was great, but that's kindergarten compared to the PhD that you get in manifestation through Tapping the Source. And what we learned from interviewing, and Jack Canfield's in it, and Mark Victor Hansen, and Neal Donald Walsch, and Michael Beckwith, and some movie stars, Mariel Hemingway, and some big business leaders, Mary Harrison, the wealthiest woman in the Middle East, who's just so many credentials. But we have a lot of famous people in the film. And what we learned was that for the majority of these people, there were two elements that were most important for their individual happiness. The first was finding a way to express gratitude every day. And the second was finding a way to be of service to others. And when you start looking at those two elements, and there is now scientific evidence showing that the expression of gratitude on a frequent basis is actually healthy from a physiological perspective. They've done studies of heart rate and death rate and all these things. So, something as simple as that. And, being of service to others, like people think, oh, well, I have no money, I can't be of service to others. It has nothing to do with money. It has to do with intentionality, and it has to do with how you conduct yourself around other human beings, really around others. I mean, being ecologically sound is a way of being of service to the planet, but just giving someone a smile is a way of being of service. So you're not needing to be, I'll be of service to others once I take care of all my needs. No, you can be of service to others even if you have nothing material in your possession at this moment. So these insights, and you need to, I will say this, you need to look at Tapping the Source 2 or 3 times to really benefit fully. Because unlike any other film in this space, we have moved so quickly. The film moves so quickly. Actually, the producer of Pretty Woman, the Julia Roberts success, was one of our early viewers, and he said at the time, I've never seen a talking head movie that moves so fast that you have no idea that it's talking heads, because it keeps moving and moving. And so there's really a lot of depth if you want it. It's there for you. But at the same time, just, if you only have time to look at it once, that's great too. You're going to move your energy. But it really is about what you said earlier in your own book. It's really about intentionality and positive energy. And if you have that, and you'll see this, we just lost my wife's mother, just passed at 98. And she was vital to the very end. She had, just in the last months of her life, a fall that greatly reduced her mobility. And her motto was, to have something to love and something to do and something to look forward to. And she had that. And it's very simple. Life can be very simple. And she had high energy as well. And so, yes, some of it, if you have high energy or low energy, there's a little bit of genetics about it, but you can control that. And if you observe people at whatever age, those who are most high energy are probably people who are most joyful about helping and contributing to others.
Yeah. It's so true. It's the, the Gandhi quote, if you want to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. And that holds true, I believe, because there are no others. And this is the path to finding, I put it oftentimes, I'll say I'm a regal servant, because I think we all are tapping into the remembrance, remembering, coming back together to the truth that, I'm one with source. So, we are divine. Yes, we're regal, and we're here to serve, and I think it's sometimes people can fall into that spiritual narcissism kind of trap if you're not careful. Like, I remember the ultimate nature of reality, and I've achieved X, Y, or Z. And it's like, grounding that in, and, service is the path to true
it's very
fulfillment.
much like the short saying, chop wood, carry water, become enlightened, chop wood, carry water. Being enlightened is a great state, but it doesn't change your human existence. Your human existence is your human existence. You have family, you have, whatever you've chosen, whatever. And I say chosen because there is likelihood that you have, if you look at yourself as both a spiritual being, soul being, and physical being, your soul being probably chose everything about the circumstances you find yourself, your family, your parents, your body, your sex, though today I guess people change their mind about that. But, most of what you have, you chose at some level, at a spiritual level. And it's a game. It's the joy of then experiencing both the highs and the lows. The lows of life teach us more. It's like when sports players are interviewed, it's like, well, I learned more from my losses than my wins. And, business leaders have said similar things. I learned more from my failures than my successes. But just having a failure is not a bad thing. We have in the film Tapping the Source, Cynthia O'Brien, who is an actress and happened to grow up on a farm, say, when as a kid, we saw failure as fertilizer. Fail more.
I like that. Failure as fertilizer. That's great.
Yeah. And so, there's a lot that is in this film that really can help people in an immediate way of how to live lives of greater joy. Because being, some people, their first reaction, and I as a kid had this, somebody would come and they would, be representing some, do-gooder society or organization or religion. And I was like, oh, yeah, right. I really want to, spend time doing that. It doesn't have to be like you're, to be of service, like, if it gives you joy, do it, but like serving in the soup kitchen or something like that. It doesn't have to be that. Being of service can be doing exactly what you love to do, but doing it in a way that benefits others. I feel very blessed in that, as a literary agent, I get more joy really out of the appreciation that some of my clients have. It's like, you changed my life, Bill. If it hadn't been for you, I never would have gotten this book. And if I hadn't had the book, then everything else in my life wouldn't have happened. That actually gives me more joy than, whatever money I make, from being the agent. And if you have that kind of work in your life, you can have a joyful life and you can have fun. I mean, I drive a fancy car and I, fly private jets, and I have all the trappings of wealth, and I enjoy them. Someday it may be that, the world economy changes and nobody has, because I do think it's ridiculous, the inequity between those who have billions and those who have so little. But at the same time, you shouldn't feel guilty if you happen to be blessed with a great deal of material wealth. You should enjoy it. And in fact, if you go back to, I love the original, I think they've done a revival of it, the great Hello, Dolly. They say that one of the main character with all the money says, money's like manure. It doesn't do any good unless you spread it around. And that's true, actually, from the point of view
more fertilizer
of economics. If you have money, the more money you spend, the more you're helping others, because then you're giving them jobs and energy.
Yeah.
And that's the thing to remember about money. Money is just energy. It's not something to worship. It's energy. And it's currency. We call it currency. It's the juice
Minda flow
that allows you to do something. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we continue on with today's episode, I'd like to take a quick moment to tell you about a podcast called Stories of Impact. As those of you that have been listening for a while know, I am always excited to get the word out there about other inspiring and insightful shows. Stories of Impact is just that. It features stories of new scientific research on human flourishing that translates these basic discoveries into practical tools. It brings a mix of curiosity, compassion, and creativity that is suitable for all ages, and it's stewarded by journalist Richard Sergey and acclaimed writer-producer Tavia Gilbert, who shine a spotlight on the human impact at the heart of a cutting-edge social and scientific research project, which was made possible through the generous support of a grant from Templeton World Charity Foundation. So if you're looking for scientific research-backed stories and tools to aid and inspire you on the path to becoming the greatest and grandest version of yourself, be sure to check out the Stories of Impact podcast. I'm curious, you know, and you've shared some, of course, perspectives and tips on tapping into greater abundance. And, you know, I'm curious what other sort of shares you have, any tips or that,
Yeah,
you know,
I mean,
quick
one of the
tips
reasons we wrote Tapping the Source was if you go back and read the Master Key System, Charles Haanel, and that you have to remember this was 1912, where the idea of meditation was very foreign to the Western mind. And in that book, he presents a meditation technique. It was very, very difficult. You had to spend like an hour, and you know there's 26 different meditations to do. And so I read that book and I was like, well, this is great, but this isn't what modern people can afford to do. You know, our time is not ours in that sense. So when we wrote Tapping the Source, I brought in John Feldy, who was probably the leading meditation teacher, stress reduction person that I knew. And he had gone to Princeton University, had all kinds of awards and things. And I had him tackle the book. At first he said, I'm too busy. And then he said, no, this really is, I had forgotten about it. This really is the seminal book. We were talking about the Master Key System. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to revise it so that it's more accessible. And he revised it and created 7 focus phrases. And these 7 focus phrases really capture the essence of the 26 lessons of the Master Key System. And he set it up, and if you read the book, he takes you through how to master the process of meditation. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes. I then at the end said, but John, once you've mastered it, you can really do it in 2 minutes. I only do it 2 minutes a day. And he was horrified. He said, you can't do that. You're not getting the maximum benefit. I said, well, look, everybody's different. It's working for me. And I actually bet there's a lot of people who are type A personalities like me who probably would do it if they were told they could do it in 2 minutes and not 20 minutes. And we actually have found that a lot of people do it. And in terms of tips for manifestation, yes, some kind of meditation. And it, you know, I do think this is the easiest and best. And that's why, you know, I think the book has sold so well. But the Tapping the Source version, and, you know, if you go back, you know, the Master Key System, the complete Master Key System includes the original Charles Haanel. That's the paperback version of the book. The Tapping the Source book is included. You can also go to Amazon and just get Tapping the Source just with the new information. And you really can master this book in a couple of hours and start meditating. And if you've never meditated before, I can guarantee you it will have a positive impact on your life.
Yeah. And I think it's important with meditation. I think a lot of people get hung up in the, you know, I don't know how, or doing it right or wrong and all these ideas. And, you know, I think it's really vital to realize just setting the time aside to be with yourself and observe what's coming up is such a powerful thing to do, right? I mean, it's just like, you know, take out all
and if you don't like sitting still, you can do walking meditation. I actually do this usually. I live near the ocean, so I get to walk on the beach. But you can walk in a forest, you can walk in a park. But it doesn't even have to be sitting and solitary. You can be walking and just
Right.
it's the focus. It's one of the conclusions that we have at the end of the Tapping the Source film is focused attention can change the world. Focused
Mm.
attention can change your world, and it can change the world. But I'd like to bring this back to how the Tapping the Source film is so related to the work of Master Sha, because Master
Yeah.
Sha's technique is based on his understanding of the Tao. The Tao,
Mm-hmm.
I've been hosting a course that Master Sha has been teaching for a year, free on Facebook, called the Tao Te Ching of
Mm-hmm.
Lao Tzu. Lao
Mm-hmm.
Tzu was a philosopher who lived in China over 2,500 years ago. He definitely had access to information
Yeah,
that is
for sure.
unexplainable. Because when he writes about the Tao, it's unbelievable how accurate he is in terms of information that only quantum physics and new breakthroughs in science have given us just in the last few decades, that confirms that his understanding of the Tao, the source, is accurate. And the information that Lao Tzu shares is so powerful. And Master Sha has a unique interpretation of Lao Tzu based on his many years, many decades of work as a Tai Chi, Qigong master, acupuncturist. Master Sha really has taken the wisdom of Lao Tzu and found practical applications which have saved hundreds of thousands of people. I did the investigation. This is why I wrote the book.
A lot of
There
miraculous
were
healings, right?
we're talking about miracle soul healings. We're talking about healings that medical science cannot explain. I did the research and I went in and I interviewed people. I saw their medical records. I saw the reports from their doctors. In many cases, their doctors have said, you know, the prognosis is you have less than a 1% chance of surviving more than 6 weeks.
Wow.
And I have at least a dozen cases I investigated where those people 10 years later are still doing well.
Wow.
And it was not, and the doctors were astonished. In one case, it was a family member. She was diagnosed with breast cancer. They said we have to operate. It's very advanced, fourth stage. And I introduced her to Dr. Sha. Dr. Sha gave her healing, calligraphy. He uses calligraphy. This is what really blows my mind, and this is covered in the book. He actually puts the energy, the healing energy, into a calligraphy and then has you trace the calligraphy. And I
Right.
can't explain the exact science behind it, but when Master Sha is creating calligraphy, he is connecting to the Tao. He is connecting to the source. And he takes this energy, which is at a different dimension from our everyday 3D, and the healing energy is in the calligraphy. And when you retrace the calligraphy, you're somehow recreating that connection. And it's that
Right.
connection which is actually doing the healing. But in any event, she did this and she'd been scheduled for the surgery. She went in and they said, well, we don't understand it, but we can't find the cancer now. But we're still going to operate because it must still be there. And
Yeah.
so they did operate, and she had the whole operation. But and they said, we'll have to monitor this. The cancer could return. She's been doing the meditation every day for the last 7 years, and it's never returned.
Wow.
So that's just one case. And then there's other things that were even sort of silly. I'm a golfer, and I had a big tournament coming up, and I got golfer's elbow. And I said, I'm probably not going to be able to play. And I happened to be with Master Sha that day, and he said, oh, here, I'll do a little calligraphy. You just trace this tonight, and by tomorrow morning you should be able to play. Sure enough, I was able to play, and I won the tournament. So
Wow.
that's a trivial example, but it's real. I mean, it was very real to me, and any golfer will tell you, or any sportsman, if somebody can do something that quickly to heal something that normally takes, several weeks to recover from, it's invaluable. Something similar happened when my daughter got married. She had an accident, and we had rented an island off the coast of Spain, and so it was a big deal wedding. It was actually a half-mile walk to where they were going to be married, and he was told, well, forget about it. You're not going to be able to even walk down a normal aisle. This is going to take 3 or 4 weeks to heal at least. So I said, well, nothing to lose. Let's see if a Master Sha calligraphy will save the day. And Master Sha did a calligraphy for her, and she traced it for 3 days. And she not only walked down that half-mile aisle, but then danced till 4 a.m. She did,
Wow.
a few days later, have to sort of wear a boot and recover. He didn't do he didn't do it, but the healing wasn't a permanent healing, but it got us through the wedding in a way we had never imagined. But those are sort of trivial examples.
Yeah.
If you go to Master Sha's own site, you'll find cases. There's a recent one of a wonderful lawyer in Europe who went all over the world trying to heal her cancer, and it wasn't until she found Dr. Master Sha, and now she's in total remission. So there's just so many cases. But what really intrigued me and what I cover in Miracle Soul Healer is how he has trained other people, his master teachers. I've got interviews of at least a dozen of his master teachers, which are included in the second part of the book. And they, in some cases, have healed people from cancers and other major diseases. This really boggles my mind, because as a medical anthropologist, I have studied, other shaman, other healers, other non-traditional healers, but I've never come across any who are able to train students to do what they do. And,
right.
I'm still puzzling over exactly how this works. I think it does have something to do with tapping into what Dr. Sha calls the Tao, what I call the source. And when you tap into the source, you are raising your vibration. So he's teaching people how to raise their vibration. When their vibration is raised, they are actually becoming the healers that he has been. And this goes on and on. His motto is, I can heal myself, you can heal yourself, together we can heal the world. And I think it's true. And so this is really what, the Miracle Soul Healer book is about. And, I start out the book as a complete skeptic. The original edition, I said exploring a mystery, because I just found it to be a fascinating mystery. The new edition, I've changed it to documenting a legend, because I'm now convinced that Dr. Sha is going to be considered a legend in the same way that Edgar Cayce is considered a healing legend.
Yeah,
and,
right.
The new edition goes into everything he's done. The thing about Dr. Master Sha that's so fascinating is he's constantly learning and innovating. So 10 years ago, he had just started with the calligraphy. Now the calligraphy is his main form of healing. 10 years ago, the main form of healing was not. It was through chanting. It was through exercises, meditations. Those are still around. But now it's focused primarily on the calligraphy. And since we know not everyone is going to have the discipline to do the calligraphy, Master Sha has now innovated what he calls Tao water. He can bless water and put that healing energy into water, and then just drinking water that has been blessed can have this powerful impact.
Yeah, you know what comes to mind, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Well, a couple things. One, as he said, I can heal myself, you can heal yourself. My perspective on these sorts of characters like Master Sha, and, of course, the most famous healer, supposedly probably around the world, Jesus Christ. And, you have had lots of iterations and people who've done some miraculous things like this. And it seems to me like, the truth of it is that they're creating, I don't know if you're familiar with Bashar, but he talks about permission slips, right? So you get momentum around a character like a Master Sha. He's putting all this intention, and he's authentic, and it's positive intention, and it's not some scheme. It's like he really is in service, and then the stories, as right now we're sharing stories of his healing. Well, the person receiving these stories are saying, "Oh wow, there's a lot of evidence here. This person, really can sort of do this thing," and my thoughts are is like, okay, we're creating a permission slip, a container that now you're you start doing whatever it is, whether it's calligraphy, whether it's water, whether it's, laying on of hands, whatever it might be, that there's enough energy and momentum around this character that he becomes a permission slip for those who then open up to the Tao, the source, to create self-healing. That's kind of my own take and perspective on it. I'm just curious what you think about that.
No, I think that you're spot on. And, one of the things that I would hope with Dr. and Master Sha, Miracle Soul Healer, is that people who are not giving themselves permission will go out and buy this book, because this book is the way to gradually go from, I don't believe any of this. I believe in science. I believe in, medical Western science. And if, you can't explain it in traditional medical terms, it can't be real. This book, it takes you on that journey of someone who started with that perspective. Before becoming a publisher, my father was a chemist. He actually was one of the foremost students of Urey, who won the Nobel Prize in chemistry. And my father was very much a believer in, the science has to, you have to understand the science or it can't be real. But the reality is, our science is what's weak. The actual miracle healings happen, and they've actually been recorded throughout history. When I was at Harvard, I studied with Dr. Arthur Kleinman, who is the foremost authority on medical anthropology in the world at the time. And what we learned was that many non-traditional healing techniques were effective throughout the world. One of the most important things, and I think this relates to the permission concept that you mentioned, is the correlate that was most significant for determining whether someone would be healed or not was the belief of the patient in the practitioner.
Right.
So it's confirming what you're saying. If you don't, and this can be, whether you believe in your medical doctor, that's going to have an impact. If you go to a doctor and you don't really trust your doctor's advice, you're probably going to have a less successful outcome than if you do trust your doctor, because there is something about the energy that you bring, what you're calling permission. If you don't actually believe, it's going to be more difficult to receive the benefit. Doesn't mean that someone who doesn't believe won't be healed. It happens all the time. And I've seen it with Dr. Sha, because I've had total skeptics say, just do it. Don't worry about it. I know you don't believe it. Just do it. And many of them remarkably have said, my God, I didn't believe it, but it worked. But whether you believe it or not, you need to be open to at least examining. And that's what Miracle Soul Healer is about. I'm not saying you need to follow Dr. Sha, but you need to at least open your mind to the possibility that the nature of reality is a little bit different than what you learned in school, and that what we're calling miracles aren't really miracles at all. It's just our lack of awareness of how the universe actually operates.
Right. It's science and mysticism, spirituality are sort of like two sides of this same coin, right? It's like you can look at it through the lens.
What we have now, I represent Dr. Gary Schwartz of the University of Arizona, and he's a big proponent of what we're calling post-materialist science, and using new information that does demonstrate that if you limit yourself just to the three dimensions that we live of material, you're limiting your understanding of how the universe actually operates. His studies include documenting how there are many communications with those who have passed over, and many who have had near-death experiences, bringing back information which is confirmed 1,000, 100,000 times. We are not one and done. We may be one and done in the body that we're occupying, but the evidence is beginning to be overwhelming that it's not just a belief that we're eternal beings, but that we actually have evidence, and that because we're eternal beings, we actually have access to a much greater consciousness than we use on a daily basis. And it's going into that consciousness, I believe, going back to the source, where we get the energy that allows self-healing that allows us as a species to raise our vibration so that we can start addressing some of these really huge problems, climate change and others, that can only ultimately be solved by a change in consciousness. Yes,
Yeah.
the manifestation is we have to change some of our practices, carbon, all that stuff. But what's really at the heart of the problems, according to Master Sha, and I think this is true, is human elements, negative information, greed, anger. These are manifesting throughout the planet in a way that is related to floods and earthquakes and fires, and all the calamities that we're seeing are to some extent impacted by human consciousness. I work
Yeah.
very closely with HeartMath, which is an
Mm-hmm.
organization that measures resonance. And they have the Resonance Project, and they have done studies, scientific studies, that show that positive resonance, when people are aligned, has more powerful energy than the random chaos when people are unconnected. So part of what we're doing with tapping the source, and one of the reasons we call it, it's not just a film, it's a movement, is we really want to raise the vibration of as many people as possible, because we feel that that is kind of the absolute necessary first step. Yes, continue everything else we're doing to, improve the environment and adjust some of the really incredibly insane things that are going on, such as the war in Ukraine. But it does start with you as an individual, and just raising your consciousness will have an impact. Obviously, you're one of 8 billion people. Your individual thoughts and actions are not going to overnight change the entire world situation. But just think about it. If even 100 million out of the 8 billion were
Yep.
aligned with similar intentionality, it would have an impact. They've done tests at Princeton University with the random computer generation devices that show that when people focus together, it changes the outcome of the computer. So,
Yep.
we've got scientific evidence. This isn't just a bunch of people
Yep.
who,
I share some of that in my book.
Pollyanna.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that I think is interesting to consider as well. This idea that there is no out there. It's all extensions of the source. You're in your own private, youniverse, and you are actually able to step in and out of potential timelines with your vibration. So on that, it's a really empowering story and narrative that I found for personally to this idea that yes, it is huge. There's so many people out there, right? And from one perspective, this idea of relative truth. You and I are separate. It's true. You and I are one. That's true. What perspective from which are we speaking? So from one perspective, they're all an extension of self. I am experiencing source through the vehicle, the avatar of Brandon Beecham in this case, and I'm in my own private universe. It's all a reflection of me, and as I change my vibration, actually able to move in and out of different versions of planet Earth and my experience. And I think actually Neal Donald Walsch talks something about this in one of the Conversations with God book. And I find that such a fascinating sort of deep dive perspective on how we can change the world by changing ourselves, if you will.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree with you. It's a little tricky, and for people hearing this for the first time, it's like, we're not saying the universe revolves around you, that you are, the center of the universe. You are the center of your universe.
Right.
And your universe coexists on a totally equal basis with the universe being co-created by every one of these 8 billion people. We are all equal. We are all moving in the same direction, whether we're aware of it or not. And we are all impacting each other. So even though, we're saying, and it's true, that you create your own universe and you are the most important element in what you're experiencing while you're here on planet Earth, it doesn't mean that you are not still subject to everything that's going on around you, because we're all co-creating simultaneously.
Yeah, and that those others are an extension of you. And who said it? Someone said it on the show recently. I think it was Paul Selig, if you're familiar with him. Paul Selig was a guest a few weeks ago, and he was like, if it's in your field at all, you are somehow a vibrational match for it. Anything, the war in Ukraine, anything that's in your field, and I find that really fascinating to think, okay, maybe we feel very far removed from some of that, but yet we're very complex, multidimensional eternal beings. And there's probably a lot of energetic baggage and things in there that maybe aren't very as apparent on the surface, but it's a very interesting thing to consider.
Indeed. So how do you want to wrap up our interview? It's been a lot of fun. I think
it's been great.
We've shared a lot of insights.
Yeah. Well, why don't you, I would like to ask one final question. And, or actually I've got two final questions. One is, if you
I have time for two. Sure.
Okay, great. If you have time, you've shared quite a bit of story already, so I'll let you off the hook if it's too much. But I always love to hear a story of synchronicity or serendipity or positive paranormal story from guests, and just something that's maybe inspiring. That's just inspiring in a bit.
I actually have several. The first one I'll share is really one that occurred for my parents. My mother was psychic, which is one of the reasons I've always been open to these experiences. My father would go to all the book shows, and my mother would go with him. And they were in Chicago, and their limousine or whatever vehicle they were taking to the airport was a little bit late. And they got to the gate, and they said, "Oh, Mr. Gladstone, we could still get you on the plane, but your luggage might not make it. But do you want to get on the plane, or do you want to wait?" And my mother said, "Let's wait." Well, unfortunately, the plane they were supposed to be on crashed, and they would have expired. So that was, one of the first revelations I had about, whoa, you better pay attention to your instincts. The second was also with my mother when she was on vacation with my dad at the Frankfurt Book Fair in Germany, and we were at home, and we were little kids at the time, and we had someone taking care of us. And my mother woke up from a dream in Paris and called and said, "Tell the kids to get out of the house right now and call the fire department. The boiler is going to explode." And so the caretaker did that, and the fire department showed up, and they said, "Boy, it's lucky you called. This thing would have blown up in another 10 minutes.
Wow.
So those were two incidents that happened to me when I was a child. Not to me, but that I was aware of.
Right.
So I was always open to synchronicity. And my whole life, frankly, has been synchronicity. In terms of more sort of normal kinds of synchronicities, it's just being open to things. When I was hired to go around the world for Rod Serling, I followed Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods, as sort of the guide for In Search of Ancient Mysteries. And unfortunately, many of the elements that Eric von Daniken wrote about weren't really as firm, shall I say, as he put in the book. For example, there was Rock of Saiwite. There supposedly had clouds that looked like rocket ships. Well, yeah, that happened once a year for some strange, phenomena of the weather, but it wasn't something we could film. So I would be like in Cusco nearby, and just sort of having a beer and lunch and see someone and start a conversation. And the person I had the conversation with ended up being a medical doctor who was an expert in laser surgery and had a collection of skulls that were 500 years old that had laser surgery evidence. So that was something we filmed. We still don't know the explanation of how all that happened, but that kind of synchronicity. And then another sort of very simple, and this is the way I've led my life. I would go to Comdex when we were doing all of our computer books. And sometimes I'd have a meeting, and Comdex was a zoo in those days, and sometimes people wouldn't show up for the meeting. And I'd look across the hall, or just across the aisle rather, and at a booth that was near the booth we were supposed to meet at. And, oh, okay, this meeting didn't happen. I'd go over to the other booth, and there'd be somebody there who is the perfect potential book author or company about whose product we should do a book. So I just built my business on synchronicity. I would just be in the right place at the right time. And a lot of the abundance I enjoyed was because of that. But, synchronicity is real. Dr. Gary Schwartz has written a book about it. But, things that you don't think are possible, it's almost like a Dickens novel where, it's too much of a coincidence. But it happens all the time. And so, I'm a big believer in that. And one of the things I write about in my novel, The 12, is even though it's a novel, I based it on my own experience. I had a near-death experience when I was 15. And that experience really sort of gave me the realization that nothing is random. Everything that we do is actually part of our ultimate destiny and purpose. Doesn't mean that you don't have free will, you do. But when you're in the zone, so to speak, things happen effortlessly because you are fulfilling sort of your mission and purpose.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. What great stories. Thank you for sharing and taking the time to come on today. And what is of course, as we mentioned earlier, we'll put a link where for the next month, you guys, as of about a month after releasing this episode, where you can watch the film Tapping the Source.
Yeah, you can watch
free.
Tapping the Source. And all we ask from your listeners is if you like the movie, I don't even know all the details. There'd be places you can post reviews, stuff like that. Please do so. And the same with the book. We really want greater visibility for Master Sha. We think that what he's doing is, as a humanitarian, some of the most important work on the planet. So if you do go out and get a copy of Miracle Soul Healer, and you read it and you enjoy it, please post a review on Amazon. That's actually the most important way. Amazon works with logarithms, and if you have a certain number of reviews, then you get more recognition, and then more reviews, you get more recognition. And that's really, in terms of visibility and getting a book, to reach the numbers necessary, the positive reviews are the most important thing you can do. So my request for those who, do go out and purchase a copy of Miracle Soul Healer, and the best way to get it is Amazon. Amazon is now sort of 80% of all book sales. Just go to Amazon, William Gladstone. You can look under my name or look under Miracle Soul Healer or Dr. and Master Sha. But, greatly appreciate if you do get the book and you do enjoy it, that you post a review on Amazon.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Final question for you. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to William Gladstone?
Well, according to me, I've always said it's really to experience joy. Because if we are all one, why are we separate? It's because each one of us has a unique way of experiencing joy, whether it's through our children or grandchildren, through our sports, through fine food, through accomplishment. But the universe is joyful. All of creation is for pleasure and joy and learning. So for me, the essence of life is to be of service to others in a way that creates the maximum amount of joy for others. And in so doing, you'll create the maximum amount of joy for yourself.
Love that. Love that. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and all the incredible work that you do in the world, William. It has been such an honor and pleasure. And all of you for tuning your beautiful brainwaves and incredible hearts into another episode. Until next time, journey well. Also, before we sign off, I wanted to remind you to download the Golden Key audio or ebook as my free gift to you at goldenkey.gift using the Golden Key code POSITIVEHEAD. And please, if you enjoy my gift, leave a positive review on Amazon so others can find the book and unlock their lives with the help of the Golden Key as well.